Lots of Tesla stock news today. Actually, we have multiple good Tesla stock news stories. We'll start with a story that stunned me as a Tesla stock investor. Let's dive in. This is one of the most bullish things you can possibly read about Tesla stock if you are a long-term investor. You don't have to be in a state of war at all times. Or is it that you find greater comfort when you are in periods of war? It's part of my default settings, Elon said. It was like he was winning the simulation and now felt at a loss for what to do. Extended periods of calm are unnerving for Elon Musk. During a conversation that month about the milestones his companies had reached, he explained to me, Walter Isaacson, why he thought Tesla was on a trajectory to be the most valuable company in the world, one that made $1 trillion in profits every year. Yet, there were no notes of celebration or even satisfaction in his voice. I guess I have always wanted to push my chips back on the table or play the next level of the game, he said. I'm not good at sitting back. $1 trillion in profits every single year. That's a lot. The reason why this is so stunning to me is because I know Elon actually means this. When I hear other people say things like, this is how much money I'm aiming for, this is how much our company will make, at least 90% of the time, they don't actually mean it. They just say that because it sounds good. You have to say that to sell your dream to perhaps your employees, your investors, etc., etc., etc. But I really believe he actually means it. Now, will Elon Musk actually accomplish this? That's the big question. But what's really important, and one reason why I am so invested in Tesla stock, is because I know most companies, they stagnate. They reach a certain level and then they stagnate, or they just grow very slowly. But with Tesla, as long as Elon Musk remains, he does not just want to stagnate. He wants to go to the next level. And at this point, he has all of the resources necessary to keep doing that. Elon Musk is not just thinking, okay, yeah, we'll solve full self-driving and then we'll be good. No. After full self-driving, he already knows exactly what he's going to do. He keeps pushing the company. He keeps innovating. He keeps pushing the employees. And as a result, Tesla will keep winning. I have been a Tesla stock investor for a while now, but time and time again, Elon Musk just keeps stunning me. He keeps exceeding my expectations over and over again in the long term. And then I put these expectations in my Tesla valuation model, which is now available on Patreon. And I can't help but be all in Tesla stock in my stock portfolio. Tesla has officially produced its 5 millionth car. This comes just 6 months after they produced their 4 millionth car. And Larry was actually, I think, the first one to call this, so congratulations to Larry. For me as a long-term Tesla stock investor, this is a huge milestone. I became a Tesla stock investor in 2019, and back then Tesla was still well under 1 million, and now we reached 5. But the big question really here is, especially for Wall Street, where do you think we are going from here? Are we going up, or is it going to start to flatten? Wall Street thinks that the growth will continue like this, that it will flatten. On the other hand, I think the growth will continue more like this in the long term. On average, Tesla now builds one car every 3.5 minutes globally. Ford, GM, and Stellantis are seeing their plants shut down due to the UAW strike, all while Tesla just produced its 5 millionth vehicle. Tesla continues to accelerate while legacy auto continues to get bogged down in unions and inefficiencies. They could have made the EV transition 10 years ago, but they chose not to. It's all on them. I don't feel even a tiny little bit sorry for Ford, GM, and Stellantis, but I do feel a little bit sorry for a lot of these employees that work for these companies, because many of them will lose their jobs, unfortunately, because these companies just will not transition all that successfully. This just highlights how terrible the UAW situation is for Ford and other automakers. If implemented, the proposal would more than double Ford's current UAW-related labor costs, which are already significantly higher than the labor costs of Tesla, Toyota, and other foreign-owned automakers in the United States that utilize non-union represented labor. United Auto Workers could call for additional strikes this week, the union's president said, today. It looks really bad for GM, Ford, and Stellantis. UBS has raised their Tesla stock price target to $290, up from $270. They believe Tesla's pricing strategy could potentially provide it with a formidable competitive edge, allowing the company to expand its customer base. This approach may also create challenges for competitors grappling with higher operating costs. You know, this slightly reminds me of Morgan Stanley's recent upgrade where they talked about Dojo, something that I already talked about back in June, and now UBS is also increasing their price target because of, let me get that straight, because of lower prices from Tesla. Tesla's pricing strategy could potentially provide it with a formidable competitive edge. What have I been talking about for the last 9 months or so now? I said lower prices will strangle the competitors. It will, of course, hurt Tesla's profitability in the meantime, but in the long term, I think that's the right call because the competition is just going to be so much less. And finally, Wall Street is starting to get it, perhaps. However, they do have a neutral rating on Tesla, so they're not saying buy Tesla stock, but clearly they do think there's some upside. Not much, but there's some upside in the short term in Tesla stock. UBS's projections suggest that Tesla's unit sales are poised to grow by approximately 22% in 2024, reaching around 2.3 million units, with an even more accelerated growth rate of approximately 41% in 2025, culminating in roughly 3.25 million units sold. I think they have higher deliveries in 2025 because they think perhaps that the next generation vehicle will be launched and it will be relatively successful, at least based on their expectations. I personally expect that Tesla will have the highest delivery growth rate in the next, let's say, 3 to 4 years in 2026. I think deliveries in 2026 will surprise many because that's then I think Tesla will really start to scale its next generation vehicle. So the growth rate that year, I think, is going to be much higher than what many people think. If you do want to see my growth expectations for Tesla, you may click the link down below in the description and join my Patreon where you will see my valuation model with all of the expectations for each year, basically. UBS's 2024 earnings per share forecast lags behind consensus estimates by approximately 12%. But slightly surpasses them by about 4% for 2025. While Tesla remains well-positioned for the future, the analyst suggests potential investors may want to wait for a more favorable entry point. I wonder if they said something similar in 2019. Well, if you said that in early 2019, yeah, you got your more favorable entry point a little bit later. But if you said it more in the later part of the year, yeah, let's say around here, even after Tesla stock dropped more than 50% during 2020, you would have still paid a lot more money for Tesla stock, so that strategy is very risky. Sure, you may buy Tesla stock right now and maybe it's going to drop from here, maybe, certainly it can happen. But I just refuse to be one of these people that try to make a little bit more money in the short term and then end up missing the big run, the next big run. If you invest in many different stocks, you can afford to do that because if you miss one, oh, okay, well, there's another opportunity here. But if you are focused on a few stocks or just mostly one stock, then yeah, you can't really afford to miss a huge opportunity, even if it means in the short term maybe you will struggle a little bit. Imagine not buying Tesla stock in February of this year because you thought, okay, well, maybe I will have a better opportunity to enter it, and you keep waiting until it drops to, let's say, 170, and you think, well, maybe it's gonna get better, and actually it did get better, and maybe you wait until here and it's like, it's only down 28% from that point. I think it's gonna go lower, maybe to 140. It will definitely go back to 140, and it just never goes that low again. Oops, maybe it will, but it hasn't so far. Let's continue. Encouragingly, reports from specific regions and UBS's Tesla price monitor indicate that price reductions have stabilized as of August 2023. In the short term, if that's true, that would be great news for the stock and bad news for those that want to buy at a lower price. So they seem to be a little bit, I think, contradicting themselves. If they think that there's going to be a more favorable entry point, why are they saying that price is stabilized? I think if price is stabilized, it also sort of implies that maybe there's going to be less inventory and maybe there's even going to be a backlog. And if that's the case, if Tesla raises price of any vehicle noticeably, I think the stock would rally. A UBS analysis of Tesla's capacity expansions and historical facility ramp-up rates indicate that aligning pricing with demand could pose limitations on midterm growth if supply cannot keep pace. UBS analysts believe that in the midterm, Tesla will continue to experiment with price elasticity, relying on its cost advantage and financial resources to fine-tune pricing and balance it with supply and demand dynamics. This strategy, though affecting the short term, may establish a robust foundation for Tesla's long-term success by allowing them to scale up, build a substantial customer base. And by the way, remember that if you buy a Tesla, most of the people actually come back to Tesla, which is not the case at all with all other brands. Even old established brands, they buy a BMW and then they move on to another car. They buy a Mercedes, they don't want a Mercedes anymore. They buy a Toyota, I don't want a Toyota anymore. That's most people. Not the case with Teslas, which means if Tesla builds its customer base right now, really is just taking care of the future. Continuing here, and exert pressure on competitors with higher battery electric vehicle BEV cost structures. A report from Tasmanian says that Tesla invites consumers for test drives at its first experience center in Thailand. I do like the name. An experience center. I like it. This is actually a really important news story for all investors and also Tesla stock investors as well, of course. The Chinese government is unofficially instructing its electric vehicle makers to use domestically produced electronic components, including semiconductors. Japanese, US, and European parts manufacturers are highly likely to be excluded from supplying Chinese EV makers in the future, going against its own slogan of high-level opening up with other countries. Beijing appears to be stepping up efforts to exclude foreign firms from growing fields. I want to emphasize, this is actually big news. Think about what is going to happen here. So let's assume that this is true. Eventually, everyone else is going to find out. The Europeans are going to find out, the Americans are going to find out, the Japanese are going to find out. Everyone will know about this. Do you think, after knowing this, do you think all of these other countries will gladly welcome cars from China? I don't think so. There are going to be huge tariffs. Now, within China, I think Chinese automakers will be extremely competitive, and in the long term, really, I think the competition will come from China. But with this move, I think it's going to be so much harder for them to actually sell to other countries. And we know that Tesla can definitely compete within China, so I'm not worried about that. But China not being able to come to other countries, that would be really good news for Tesla, because Tesla will produce vehicles on every continent anyway, so it doesn't matter if some countries have some disagreements with each other and they put huge tariffs on each other. That would be perfect for Tesla, actually. Now, is this actually going to happen? Well, let's dig deeper into the story. The instruction was given verbally by a former Chinese industry and information technology minister at a meeting that was held last November involving representatives from domestic automakers. So last November, this happened about a year ago. The former minister reportedly not only asked the manufacturers to use domestically produced parts, but also called for setting targets for the proportion of domestically produced parts used in EVs. If the makers fail to meet these targets, they may be subject to penalties, the sources said. And remember this story where the European Union wants to investigate the Chinese because they think that these vehicles are subsidized, and therefore the Europeans want to put higher tariffs on Chinese cars? I have a feeling, and this is just a feeling, this may not be the case, but I have a feeling that somehow these two stories are connected. The instruction was given verbally by the former minister to leave no evidence of the exclusion of foreign firms, a diplomatic source in China said, by clearly stating in the work plans that the supply chain will be reinforced. I think it's really smart for Chinese to do it this way, where they did this unofficially, because then everyone else just finds out much later than they would have otherwise found out. But I really don't think other countries will just sit down, lay back and do nothing about this. I think there will be repercussions. If Chinese companies start aggressively competing in EV parts production, Japanese, US, and European makers will lose their international competitiveness. But then I also think these Chinese automakers or parts producers will lose access to other markets, or at least if they still have access to these markets, they will be taxed more heavily with tariffs. Can you believe that this guy, Jim Chanos, said in 2017, we think Tesla is worth zero? You would think that he learned his lesson, right? Well, it's 2023 now, and he says that Tesla is ridiculously overvalued. However, unlike Gordon Johnson, who does not short Tesla stock, which means that he actually does not believe what he says at all because he's just not willing to put his money on the line, Jim Chanos actually shorted Tesla stock earlier this year. I remember watching him on TV when Tesla stock was just a little bit over $100. So I think this is probably right. He entered the short position at $113. And recently, just now, really on TV, he clarified that he's still short Tesla stock. That is just ridiculous. And this person manages billions of dollars, by the way. So he's not just some random dude with $10,000. No, he manages billions of dollars. His investors will lose money. Well, they already lost money based on his position. Based on his Tesla stock position, at least from that position, they lost money. I agree with Bradford here. Note to self, never short companies that are outside of your specialty. Chanos is a value investor. He should focus on value stocks, long and short. In my opinion, he should absolutely not be shorting tech or growth stocks. After years of losing money shorting Tesla stock, famed short seller Jim Chanos and his legion of followers still don't get that current year PE tells you nothing about valuation. Value is the discounted cash flow of all future cash flows less net debt or plus existing net cash. But also, I have to admit, people like Jim Chanos makes making videos like this so much more fun, because I remember him shorting Tesla stock back in January when I saw that video of his appearance on TV. Looking back, this was great. This is awesome. I just feel really sorry for people that believe in him and followed his recommendations. Elon Musk just made somewhat of a threat just now. At the risk of stating the obvious, I don't know what's going on with every part of this platform all the time, but our policy worldwide is to fight for maximum freedom of speech under the law. Anyone working for X Corp who does not operate according to this principle will be invited to further their career at any one of the other social media companies who sell their soul for a buck. This was in response to this controversy where it was reported that X is complying with more German requests compared to pre-acquisition when it comes to identifying users in hate speech cases, German prosecutors say. This has raised concerns among civil liberties advocates due to the strict and broad nature of Germany's hate speech laws. But this is not X's problem, this is Germany's problem. Elon has to comply with the law, otherwise X will be kicked out of that country, for example, Germany. Check this out. MrBeast just made this video and already 50 million people saw this, and he featured this Tesla vehicle where he demonstrated full self-driving. Take a look. This is free advertising. This is very good news.
Bring in the $100,000 car, which drives itself. No joke, no one is currently in this car and it is moving. Let's see what 100 grand gets you. There's a lot of room in this car. This is one of the few cars that can actually fit all my kids.
Do you have kids?
Yeah, all of them. Let's take it for a little spin. The real reason you're buying a Tesla is because it can drive itself. All right, I'm no longer driving the car. Oh, it's switching lanes. Whoa! It is literally driving itself. My feet are not touching the gas and I'm not touching the steering wheel.
Jimmy, are you telling me now you can take a nap while driving?
No, don't do that.
Oh, okay.
Now, let's see how fast the car can go.
It jerks you backwards.
That's terrifying.
Some people are wondering, is Tesla stock going back to $100? I answered that question in a 20-minute video, which is exclusively available on Patreon. Also, if you join my Patreon, you will get my Tesla valuation model with all of my assumptions that go into producing the prices that I'm willing to pay for Tesla stock between 2023 and 2033, each year between these 2 years. My name is Matt Posius. Like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and YouTube says you should watch this video next, but if you haven't finished watching, this Elon Musk interview, then watch this one first. Thank you again for watching.